The Dance of Shadows. The autumn evening settled over Nevermore Academy like a dark velvet curtain. Ancient stone walls absorbed the last whispers of daylight, and shadows began their nightly dance across the Gothic corridors. In her dormitory room, Wednesday Addams sat perfectly still at her antique typewriter, fingers poised above the keys like a pianist preparing for a midnight sonata. The dormitory was quiet now. Her roommate Enid had departed hours ago for the rave and dance, leaving behind a cloud of cotton candy perfume and excited chatter. Wednesday had declined the invitation, naturally. Social gatherings were as appealing to her as sunshine on a cloudless day. The typewriter keys remained untouched. For the first time in her methodical existence, words failed to materialize. Her latest manuscript, a tale of revenge and botanical warfare, lay incomplete. The characters seemed to mock her from the page, frozen mid-sentence like dancers waiting for music that would never come. A gentle knock interrupted her contemplation. Wednesday. Came a familiar voice through the heavy wooden door. It was Sarah, a quiet girl from down the hall who shared Wednesday's appreciation for literature and solitude. The dance, it's starting soon. Are you certain you won't reconsider? Wednesday's response was measured and calm. Social rituals hold no fascination for me, Sarah. I find greater meaning in the company of fictional murders than actual people. But as Sarah's footsteps faded down the corridor, something stirred within Wednesday's chest. Not longing. She would never admit to such weakness, but perhaps curiosity. Through her window, she could see streams of students making their way toward the main hall, their laughter echoing off the stone pathways like birds at dawn. She stood slowly, her black dress rustling like autumn leaves. In the mirror's reflection, she saw herself as always, pale as moonlight, dark hair framing her face like curtains around a stage. But tonight, something felt different. The air itself seemed to pulse with an energy she couldn't name. Her fingers traced the edge of her desk, finding the small music box that had belonged to her grandmother Morticia. She wound the tiny key, and a haunting melody filled the room, slow, deliberate notes that seemed to awaken something ancient within the walls themselves. The music wrapped around her like morning mist. Without conscious decision, her body began to respond. One hand rose gracefully, fingers extending like the petals of a night-blooming flower. Her other arm followed, creating elegant lines against the lamplight. Wednesday's movements were unlike anything seen in conventional dance halls. They spoke of midnight ceremonies and whispered secrets, of storms gathering over moonlit graveyards. Each gesture was deliberate, purposeful, as if she were conducting an invisible orchestra of shadows. Her feet moved in patterns that seemed both ancient and entirely her own. She turned slowly, her dress creating a dark circle around her like ripples on a still pond. The dance was not performance but ritual, not exhibition but meditation. As the melody continued, Wednesday found herself transported. The cramped dormitory room faded away, replaced by vast ballrooms filled with candlelight and mystery. She danced for the outcasts and the misunderstood, for every soul who had ever felt like a stranger in their own world. Her movements grew more fluid, more confident. She had found her voice, not in words this time, but in the language of motion. Each step told a story, each gesture painted emotions across the air like brushstrokes on canvas. The music box began to wind down, its notes growing softer and more spaced apart. Wednesday's dance slowed to match, becoming gentler, more introspective. She raised her arms above her head like branches reaching toward stars, then let them fall gracefully to her sides. In the sudden silence, she stood perfectly still once more. But something fundamental had changed. The room felt different now, charged with the energy of her unexpected expression. Her reflection in the mirror showed the same pale face, the same dark eyes, but there was a new quality there, a quiet satisfaction, perhaps even peace. She returned to her typewriter and sat down carefully, smoothing her dress. Her fingers found the keys with renewed purpose, and words began to flow like water from a long dry well. The story that emerged was different from her usual tales of revenge and Gothic horror. This one spoke of solitary figures finding beauty in their isolation, of dance as a form of prayer, of the poetry that exists in unexpected moments. Outside her window, the rave and dance continued in the main hall. Students laughed and spun under glittering lights, following rhythms that everyone could hear. But here, in the quiet sanctuary of her room, Wednesday had discovered a different kind of music entirely. The evening wore on, and her typewriter keys created their own rhythm, a gentle percussion that accompanied her thoughts. She wrote of characters who found strength in solitude, who danced to melodies that played only in their hearts, who understood that the most profound connections sometimes happen in perfect isolation. As midnight approached, Wednesday finally paused in her writing. The manuscript was complete, transformed by her unexpected evening of movement and discovery. She looked once more at the music box, its tiny ballerina frozen mid-pirouette, and allowed herself the smallest of smiles. The dance had ended, but its echoes would remain. In the morning, she would return to her usual routine of sardonic observations and literary pursuits. But tonight had taught her something valuable. Sometimes the most meaningful performances have an audience of one, and the most beautiful dances are those that nobody else will ever see. She closed the music box gently, and the room settled back into its familiar quiet. Wednesday Addams, in her own peculiar way, had found a new form of expression, one that belonged entirely to her, as unique and mysterious as the young woman herself.